All right, so today we're talking about sex. Now, with sex, we could go so many different ways with this topic. So I want to see what you guys think. As far as we could talk about postpartum sex, immediately postpartum. We could talk about the physiological changes postpartum and how it, affects our sex lives. Also, maybe the mental impact of sex. So what do you guys think we should dive into first?
How about sex postpartum?
Okay,
Yeah.
deal. So, as we unpack the challenges of motherhood, thinking about sex postpartum, especially early postpartum, it can be very intimidating. I don't know about for you guys, but for me, I was like, this is gonna hurt. What's gonna happen? Like stuff has gone down there.
Did anyone give you like horror stories or say that it was going to be bad or that you're never going to be the same, or were you worried about that?
I was. Were you guys like, I heard the goods and the bads. Everybody was like, yeah, 2 weeks postpartum. I was back in it. I'm thinking.
And I came from the opposite side where it was a C-section and then a VBAC with a 4-pound baby. So I was like, this is a piece of cake. I hardly felt anything. So I thought, like, let's just jump right back in and it's not even going to be a problem. I was wrong.
And I was super scared because I had a 2nd-degree tear. And so that's where I was like, oh, this is going to be terrible. It's going to hurt so bad.
Yep.
But I was actually pleasantly surprised. So,
and I don't know, because it seems like, you said cesarean birth, vaginal birth, tears. I had prolapse and tears. And so in my mind, I was thinking about, say your cesarean birth or my prolapse, I'm thinking, oh no, I have these factors. What is that going to play into my sex life?
So how did your prolapse play into it?
It was more, I think, mentally. I was like, oh no, I'm going to feel different. Everything's going to hurt. Maybe I haven't healed properly. My body's not ready for this. That was my experience, especially with prolapse, because it's a strong word and you really don't know what's going on down there. And you're thinking, this is going to be a whole nother level. I just gave birth. What's next? But how about you with cesarean birth, Rachel?
So immediately after the cesarean birth, it was a really traumatic situation overall. But that didn't really play a huge role in our sex life. I was actually back pretty quick. I never went into labor, never dilated. So really it wasn't anything scary for me. It was like, well, nothing changed. My abs are healed, or basically it doesn't hurt anymore to move or breathe. So like, why the heck not? And nobody gave me really any advice one way or the other as to like, should I or shouldn't I? And so I'm kind of curious if you got any advice, like dealing with the prolapse, going back into being sexually active.
Not really. It was kind of like, looking back at it now, I kind of laugh. Because I don't know if you guys experienced this too. It was more like, oh, just have a couple of glasses of wine, relax, use lots of lube, it'll be great. And you're thinking, I don't know how much lube you're thinking I'm going to be having to use. But no, I don't think I was given really the advice that maybe I really needed, besides, the 2 glasses of wine and lube. And also maybe not so much the physiological aspect of it, but more the mental load and the psychological thinking, oh no, am I going to feel different? Is this going to be super painful? Just the anticipation leading into it and that mental load, I think, was the biggest barrier for me. What about you guys?
Yeah. So I wasn't really concerned either time. The first time I was kind of like, is everything okay? Am I going to find out that there's a problem? Yeah. But I don't know. I didn't hear a bunch of horror stories. I wasn't thinking that it was going to be like a bad thing or a scary thing. And I just had a thought. The 2 of you have only had Uno babies.
1.
So do you think that, yeah, that's what I'm looking at you, I'm sorry. And I was going to say, me and Rachel, we've had the 2 different experiences. So do you think that if you were to have another baby or another birth, do you think that you might have a different perspective than the first time? Or Rachel, did you think differently the second time having your previous experience?
I was definitely a bit more cautious with the second experience because it had been a vaginal birth as opposed to a cesarean birth. So it was also less traumatic, and my kids slept better the second time around. Like, just, got things together. So there was a bit more time to think about sex in the second postpartum period than there was in the first. But I definitely was a bit more apprehensive, and it actually did turn out to be a bit more painful. But I also think the wine idea is probably some of like the worst advice.
Yeah. It like put me all in my head, and I'm like, oh my goodness.
Right. Well, and shouldn't we be able to respond to our pain and make appropriate adjustments and communicate with our partner? And the thing is, if our bodies can't even communicate with us, how can we communicate effectively with our partner?
Right. That is so true.
Of course. Like, what are we doing?
Exactly. No, I completely agree, because by dulling our senses, that's supposed to help it go better. You know what I mean? How does that work?
It doesn't work.
Right, right.
I think that kind of defeats the purpose.
Along the way, talking about anal intercourse, or even trying a new position, or introducing a new object.
Oh, my husband would have been all about that.
It's always about, you need to be communicating, and you need to be responsive to what your body's saying. And so it's not about like, let's dull our senses and like go for it, right? And that's how everyone gets hurt. And that's how it becomes a painful and unenjoyable experience.
Well, and I liked how Kelly pointed out, we've only had one child. And I expected, Rachel, I expected you to say that your second one was better, but then whenever you mentioned that it was your VBAC, like that makes so much more sense. And so for me, I'm looking at, okay, so if I have a second birth, will that impact my prolapse, or, depending on the degrees of tears that you might experience, because you are more susceptible naturally after you've had a first tear with your first baby to have another tear. How would I mentally be like, okay, so it went well the first time, maybe that would calm me, or maybe it would make me a little bit more apprehensive. I can't even answer that, if that would make it better. Or
I think with mine, especially because I did tear, I was more apprehensive about how it was going to feel. And I think I probably needed a glass of wine so I could get out of my head a little bit. But I was cleared at 6 weeks, but we didn't actually take the plunge until 8 weeks, because I was still having a lot of issues with my stitches and just the area in general. And so we were very cautious, and I made sure to tell my husband, like, let's get really warmed up first. Let's actually have some fun before we have the fun. And he was actually really, good about that, because he did. And we did use a lot of lube.
Hey, you do what you got to do. But the funny thing is I say funny, but the interesting thing is, as we're having these conversations about sex, we just went straight for penetration. It's even almost that intimate action of being close to your partner after holding a tiny human, carrying a tiny human, birthing tiny human, now taking care of tiny human. There's a lot of interaction there. And then to be like, okay, now I want more interaction with my husband. That could either be, yes, I'm all for that, or it could be, no, I've already given my all to a tiny, beautiful baby. And how can I hold space for an intimate relationship now with my husband again?
And it's almost like I kind of felt overtouched and overstimulated and I don't want to be touched. I just want to be by myself and take a shower, And I think part of that conversation has to be like, okay, so I have been holding this tiny human, and like, yes, my love tank is full because I have had that touch all day long, but I am out touched right now, and I don't want to be touched any longer. So how do you guys deal with that as far as the level of intimacy versus your touch and that sort of thing?
Yeah. So for me, I think that postpartum and the first time that you're choosing to have sex again postpartum is a really huge opportunity for communication and for building your relationship and for deciding when it's the right time and how can your partner support you so that you are feeling comfortable and you are feeling ready for that, because you can logically want that, your body's like, yes, I'm ready for this, I want this, then you're also like, I really want to go take a shower and sit by myself. So how can he support you so that you can have that, and it's a goal for both of you? What can you do?
So
you have shower sex.
Whoa.
So
it's like all communication. Like that's
Right.
been the major thing, like communication. It's so, I love how you said that, Kelly, because you have that dialogue. And I loved how you said it's a building block. Like it's one of the things that can make your relationship stronger during this time. Because there's a lot of pressures around this time of our lives where we're we have new kids and we're trying to also foster our intimate relationship. So that's a good point.
And for us, it was a lot of looking at how we can be like intimate in alternative ways. And one of that is like, what roles can my husband take on to like help with that being touched out or help with that being exhausted thing? Because if he can take on some of that, then I can make room in my, mental space or in my physical like cup of love here. Like I can make some room for him because he's just taking some things on. So, and it was a matter of kind of like appreciating some of those things that he was doing out of love for me and finding the intimacy in those things. Does that make sense? So it
totally
was,
does.
there's nothing sexier than my husband folding some freaking laundry, And so I was kind of like spending some time, like I'm stuck holding a baby. So like, you're going to have to learn to fold a towel, man.
Yeah. And I don't know. I think it's kind of sexy whenever one of my husband's doing the dishes. I'm like, that just touches my heartstrings right there.
I think they think that's a joke, by the way. I don't think they think that's serious.
Yeah. I think you're onto something there. Like they're like, what are you saying? Yeah.
They think we're kidding that like doing dishes is sexy, but like men, come on.
Like I love waking up and going into the kitchen and having a completely 100% clean kitchen so I can start my day without having to worry about what's on the counter.
Right.
Yeah.
True.
Those are like the best surprises to walk into, hands down.
Or just like my husband woke up with the baby that morning and like got her dressed and like got the toddler dressed. And that's just like 30 minutes of arguing with a 2-year-old that I now don't have to do, And so, yeah, like I didn't have to figure out how to convince a 2-year-old to put on shoes and pants while also having a baby attached to my boob. Like, look at all those touches I have for you now.
Yes. I love that. Oh, yes. I love that.
Yeah, I love that too.
I like that. Look at all the touches that I have for you. Because it's there's only one of you, right? So as we kind of adopt on this new human that we were trying to take care of and love, now we kind of have to figure out how does that love, and again, we love our kids, we love this new precious baby, but we also have to have that intimate relationship with our significant other. And it can be, I don't know, it can be a lot of stress, but kind of making the space. And I love that, having that love spread and the touches spread so that there's space for that is very significant. I like that a lot.
So I'm curious if y'all would have done something different your second time around, or if there's advice you've gotten now that you wish you'd had then, or education that you've expanded on that you wish you had then, that would have changed your like postpartum sexual experience.
Kelly, go first. I know you got this, my friend.
I don't know that I would have done anything different. It was a positive experience. I don't know.
That's good.
I would say that the second time was easier. I didn't really have any trauma or damage or anything going on from either of my births. My second birth was a water birth, and I feel like I did have more elasticity because of that, the water effects, so that I didn't have any problems.
Yeah, that tension wasn't there. So you were able to relax. You were able to kind of, your body physiologically was able to respond. And you kind of created that environment, which is just huge.
So I think that might have played a role in addition to it being the second time. And I don't know. It's just good stuff, the communication.
Yeah, and so you and I, both in fitness, we both went back to work 2 weeks after, so both 2 weeks postpartum, and I wrote about this in my blog about how I wish I would have taken more time to heal and to recover before I went back. same thing. Like, that's why we waited 8 weeks. But if I had to do it all over again, I would probably not go back to work 2 weeks after. However, it was out of my control, so I couldn't not go back. But I would definitely wait longer. I would take more time with my little one to heal, to get to know them. I would probably do the full 4 or 6 weeks before doing anything, so that way I could focus on the internal healing, not only mentally, but physically as well. And so going back to work so soon really hindered that for me. And I think it kind of hindered the leap into the sexual experience as well. And so maybe next time those factors won't be in play. And so I'll be able to take that time and recover, and then probably have a better, more positive experience the second time around.
I would say
that's a really good point.
Yeah. I would say that my only thing, I would change a couple things, but some of my factors were out of my control, where I was going, back to the field to finish my graduate degree. I know Rachel's laughing because she knows the situation, but hopping back into it, it was something that I had to do. There was no option given to me to wait a little bit longer. But then also just maybe I am a very, I want to be a very independent person. I've kind of fostered that over my experiences. And so I want to be able to provide for my family and show, that not be super mom, but maybe I had a little bit of super mom complex. I don't know. And so I was trying to do all the things. And I think I should have been like, hey, babe, I really, really need you to do this. Instead of being like, no, I got that, and, 1 week postpartum waddling over there to do the dishes or something like that. There's certain things that I could have let go instead of trying to be, that type A perfection person. But I think that I did learn through that experience where I'm like, okay, so you can let go of some things, but
delegate the tasks.
Yes. Because then I could have that space for that love. And the more that I did that, the more I was able to have that space for love and intimacy and sex. So that's probably my biggest takeaway, was being able to let go of some things. That way I could foster that space.
Yeah, I think I echoed that in my first, with the cesarean birth, and my kiddo was then immediately taken by ambulance a couple hours away to the NICU. So but I also, God, this is so funny. I had the cesarean, it was an emergency cesarean. And then, I was taken, or the kid was taken, and I'm not even kidding, 6 hours later, I danced. I did this little jig, because I thought that would somehow convince my doctors that I was ready to be discharged 6 hours after a major surgery. I don't know how I convinced them, but somehow they let me go. And then I decided that I also needed to get off my painkillers within 24 hours of the surgery. So I was in a whole world of hurt. So, really, I was actually a stay-at-home mom at the time, or was transitioning into that. So I didn't go back to work, but I surely tried to be super mom, and was waddling around the NICU. I was there for every feeding. We stayed in the Ronald McDonald house, and, I was there and waddling around the hospital trying to feed my kiddo at all hours of the night.
So trying to be super mom and then creating that space for maybe having intimacy with your partner later, it's kind of hard. Yeah. Bringing it back to that sexual component, that intimacy component can kind of get hard. But yeah, I love this discussion, because I think that we all come at it from different spaces. And so a lot of different people can relate, because every experience is different. And so thanks for this conversation, you guys. Yeah. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.